1943, North Africa. When Italian soldier Giovanni surrendered to American forces, he braced himself for the brutal treatment Mussolini's propaganda had promised: starvation, beatings, maybe death. Instead, he walked into a Texas POW camp mess hall and saw something that made him weep: roast chicken, real coffee, butter, and white bread. More food than he'd seen in 2 years of fighting for Italy. But how could America's prison offer more abundance and dignity than Mussolini's vision of a glorious empire ever did? Italy in 1940 felt like a country wrapped in iron chains painted gold. Benito Mussolini stood on balconies in Rome and shouted about the glory of a new Roman Empire, while families in Calabria ate thin soup made from potato peels. The propaganda posters covered every wall in every city. They showed strong Italian soldiers marching toward victory. They showed wheat fields bursting with grain. They showed happy families eating at tables filled with food. None of it was true. In the small village of Serra San Bruno, tucked into the mountains of southern Italy, 22-year-old Giovanni Russo knew the truth. He knew it every morning when his mother divided one loaf of bread among 7 people. He knew it when his father came home from the fields with empty hands because the government had taken most of the harvest. He knew it when his younger sister asked why they never had meat anymore, and his mother just looked away. The ration cards arrived each month like cruel jokes. They promised flour, oil, and sugar. But the shops had empty shelves. The baker would shrug and say the supplies went to the army first. The army needed food to fight Mussolini's wars in Africa and Greece. The people at home could wait. They waited and grew thinner. Giovanni worked in his father's olive grove, but even the trees seemed tired. The government demanded half of every harvest. Local fascist officials counted every olive, every drop of oil. If you held back even a little, men in black shirts came to your door. Some neighbors disappeared. No one asked where they went. Asking questions was dangerous. The secret police watched everything. In the town square, Mussolini's portrait hung next to the church. Old men, who remembered when Italy was poor but free, whispered carefully in doorways. Young men like Giovanni learned to smile and nod when fascist youth leaders talked about Italy's destiny. Inside, they wondered why destiny felt so much like hunger. In April 1941, the letter came. Giovanni had been drafted. His mother held the paper with shaking hands. His father said nothing, just stared at the olive trees outside. His sister cried. Giovanni packed a small bag with 2 shirts, 1 pair of socks, and a photograph of his family. He kissed his mother's cheek and walked to the train station. The army gave him a uniform that had belonged to someone else. The previous owner's blood still stained the collar brown. The boots had holes in the soles. Giovanni stuffed newspaper inside to cover them. His rifle was old, from the last war. Half the time it jammed when he tried to fire it during training. The officers yelled about Italian pride and Roman glory. The soldiers whispered about how Germany had better equipment, and wondered why Italy's great empire couldn't even supply decent boots. They fed the soldiers watery soup and hard bread. Sometimes there was cheese, but it was often moldy. Giovanni ate it anyway. He was still hungry. Everyone was hungry. The officers ate better. They had wine with their meals and meat twice a week. The regular soldiers watched and said nothing. Complaining could get you sent to punishment units on the coldest mountain posts. In the barracks at night, the men told jokes to keep from crying. They joked that the Ethiopian empire Mussolini bragged about was just sand and rocks. They joked that Italian tanks were so weak they had reverse gears instead of forward ones. They joked that their rifles were so old they should be in museums. The laughter was bitter and quiet. Guards walked past the windows. Giovanni's unit shipped to North Africa in summer 1941. The transport ship was crowded and hot. Men got sick. Some died before reaching land. In the Libyan desert, Giovanni learned new kinds of misery. The sun burned like fire. Water was scarce. Supply trucks rarely came. When they did come, they brought ammunition, but not food. The British and later the Americans had planes and tanks. Italy's equipment broke down constantly. Soldiers used camels because trucks ran out of fuel. For 2 years, Giovanni fought in a war he did not understand for a cause he did not believe in. He watched friends die from bullets and dysentery and despair. He wrote letters home that army censors marked through with black ink. He received letters from his mother written on paper so thin he could see through it. She never mentioned food, but he knew. He knew she was hungrier now than when he left. By 1943, everyone knew Italy was losing. Germany was losing. The other soldiers stopped pretending. They talked openly about surrender. Some officers still shouted about fighting to the last man. Most soldiers just wanted to survive. Giovanni thought about his mother's face, his sister's voice, the olive grove on the hillside. He thought about anything except dying in the sand for Mussolini's lies. In May 1943, near Tunis, American forces surrounded Giovanni's position. His commanding officer had fled 2 days earlier. The remaining soldiers had almost no ammunition and no food at all. When the American tanks rolled forward, Giovanni and 40 other men raised their hands. They dropped their worthless rifles in the dirt. Giovanni felt relief flood through him like cool water. He was done fighting. The American soldiers were young, clean, well-fed. They chewed gum and smoked cigarettes. They gave prisoners water from canteens that did not taste like rust. One soldier offered Giovanni a chocolate bar. Giovanni had not tasted chocolate in 3 years. He ate it slowly, and for the first time in months, he felt something other than fear and hunger. He felt confused. These were supposed to be the enemy. These were the cruel Americans that Mussolini's propaganda warned about. They were giving him chocolate. The transport ship to America took 3 weeks. Giovanni expected a dark hold with no food and beatings from guards. Instead, prisoners slept on bunks with thin mattresses. They got 2 meals each day. The meals were simple but real: beans and rice. Bread that was only 2 days old. Coffee that tasted burnt but was hot. American guards walked the decks without rifles pointed. One guard showed Giovanni a photograph of his own family in New York. Giovanni did not understand why an enemy would share something so personal. When the ship docked in Virginia, Giovanni stepped onto American soil, expecting chains. Instead, a sergeant checked names on a list and pointed prisoners toward trucks. The trucks had benches. They drove for hours through countryside that looked impossibly green. Giovanni saw farms with painted barns and fat cattle. He saw houses with glass windows that were not broken. He saw roads that were paved smooth. Everything looked clean and whole. There were no bomb craters. No burned buildings, no signs of war at all. The camp sat in flat Texas land that stretched forever. Rows of wooden barracks painted white stood in neat lines. Tall fences surrounded everything, but the fences looked almost friendly in the bright sun. Guard towers rose at each corner, but the guards seemed bored, not cruel. Giovanni carried his small bag into a barrack that smelled like fresh pine and soap. Each prisoner got a bed with a real mattress, 2 blankets, and a pillow. Giovanni pressed his hand into the pillow. It was soft. He had slept on packed dirt and bare wood for 2 years. That first evening, a guard told prisoners to line up for dinner. Giovanni's stomach hurt from emptiness. He got in line with the others. They shuffled forward slowly. The man in front of him whispered that maybe they would get soup, maybe some bread if they were lucky. Giovanni hoped for anything. He had eaten nothing since morning. The mess hall doors opened. Warm air rushed out, carrying smells that made Giovanni dizzy. Roasted meat, baked bread, cooked vegetables, real butter. Giovanni thought he was imagining things. His mind was playing tricks from hunger. But then he stepped inside and saw the serving line. Behind the counter, American cooks in white aprons stood with serving spoons. On the counter sat huge metal pans full of food, actual food. More food than Giovanni had seen in one place since before the war started. The first cook plopped a piece of chicken on Giovanni's metal tray, the leg and thigh together, brown and glistening. The second cook added a mound of white mashed potatoes with a pool of brown gravy. The third cook spooned green beans next to the potatoes. The fourth cook placed 2 thick slices of white bread on the tray and added a pat of yellow butter. The fifth cook poured black coffee into a tin cup. Giovanni stood frozen. The cook behind him said something in English and laughed. Giovanni moved forward in a daze. He sat at a long wooden table. Other prisoners sat in silence, staring at their trays. One man was crying. Tears ran down his face into his food. Giovanni picked up his fork. His hand shook. He cut a piece of chicken. The meat was tender and juicy. He put it in his mouth. The taste exploded across his tongue. salt and pepper and herbs he could not name. He chewed slowly, he swallowed, he took another bite, then another. He ate the potatoes. They were creamy and smooth. He ate the green beans. They were cooked with bacon. He spread butter on the bread. The butter melted into the warm bread and tasted like childhood memories of better times. Giovanni ate everything on his tray. He drank all the coffee. When he finished, he felt full for the first time in 3 years. Actually full, not just less hungry, but satisfied. He looked around the mess hall. American soldiers ate at tables near the windows. They talked and laughed. They ate the same food the prisoners ate. Giovanni could not understand it. In the Italian army, officers ate meat while soldiers ate slop. Here, everyone ate chicken. The next morning, Giovanni woke thinking the meal had been a dream. But breakfast was eggs and toast and oatmeal with sugar. Lunch was beef stew with carrots and potatoes. Dinner was pork chops and rice and canned peaches. Every single day, 3 meals. Real meals. Giovanni started gaining weight. His pants got tight. Other prisoners looked healthier too. Their faces filled out. Their eyes looked less hollow. After 2 weeks, a guard asked for volunteers to work in the camp kitchen. Giovanni raised his hand. He wanted to see where all the food came from. He wanted to understand. In the kitchen, he watched American cooks prepare meals for 800 prisoners. Giant sacks of flour and sugar lined the walls. Refrigerators hummed with meat and milk and eggs. Shelves held canned vegetables stacked to the ceiling. An entire room stored nothing but bread. Giovanni asked the head cook where it all came from. The cook shrugged and said it came from farms in Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. Just regular farms. They had plenty. One afternoon, a truck pulled up behind the kitchen. The side of the truck said Coca-Cola in red letters. The driver unloaded wooden crates full of glass bottles. The camp store sold them to prisoners for 5 cents each. Giovanni had earned 15 cents working in the kitchen. He bought 3 bottles. The soda was cold and sweet and bubbled on his tongue. He drank one immediately. He saved 2 for later. He could buy soda whenever he wanted. This was prison. This was supposed to be punishment. At night, Giovanni lay on his soft mattress under his blankets and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his mother eating potato peels. He thought about his sister asking why there was no meat. He thought about Mussolini's speeches about Italian greatness. He thought about the propaganda posters showing abundant harvests. All lies. Everything had been lies. America kept its enemies better fed than Italy kept its own people. November 1943 arrived cold and clear. Guards told prisoners that Americans celebrated something called Thanksgiving. It was a holiday about gratitude and harvest. Giovanni did not understand at first. Italy had harvest festivals, but those had disappeared under Mussolini. Any celebration meant less food for regular people and more speeches about sacrifice. But the Americans approached this differently. They approached it with food. The camp kitchen worked for 3 days preparing the feast. Giovanni helped peel potatoes until his fingers cramped. Mountains of potatoes, more than he could count. Other prisoners chopped onions and celery. The cooks roasted 30 enormous turkeys in the big ovens. The smell filled the entire camp. Sweet and rich and almost painful to smell because it was so good. Giovanni had never eaten turkey. In Italy, only wealthy families could afford such birds. On Thanksgiving morning, the mess hall was decorated. American flags hung from the rafters. Someone had drawn pictures of turkeys and autumn leaves on paper and taped them to the walls. The long tables were covered with white sheets instead of being bare wood. At each place sat real plates, not metal trays. Cloth napkins folded into triangles. Actual forks and knives that matched. Giovanni walked in and stopped. It looked like a restaurant. It looked like the fancy places in Rome he had only seen through windows. The prisoners sat down at noon. American officers and guards sat at tables too, mixed in with the prisoners. An American chaplain stood at the front. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He spoke in English first, then an interpreter translated into Italian. The chaplain said they were gathered to give thanks. He said that even in war, even among enemies, there was room for gratitude and humanity. He said every person deserved dignity and a full stomach. He said these things simply, without grand speeches or propaganda. Giovanni felt something crack inside his chest. The food came out in waves. First, bowls of soup. creamy pumpkin soup with a swirl of cream on top. Then plates of turkey, the meat white and tender with crispy brown skin. Mashed potatoes so smooth they looked like clouds. Sweet potatoes with brown sugar and butter melted on top. Green beans with almonds. Bread rolls so soft Giovanni could tear them apart with his fingers. Cranberry sauce that was both sweet and sour, and gravy. Rich brown gravy that covered everything. Giovanni filled his plate. He filled it until food touched other food. He ate slowly, tasting everything. The turkey melted in his mouth. The sweet potatoes tasted like candy. The bread was warm and yeasty. Around him, other prisoners ate in silence at first. Then someone laughed, then someone else. Soon the whole room buzzed with conversation and the sound of forks on plates. Guards smiled, prisoners smiled back. For one afternoon, the war seemed very far away. After the main meal, the cooks brought out dessert. Pumpkin pie with whipped cream, apple pie with ice cream. Giovanni took a slice of each. The pumpkin pie was spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg. The apple pie was warm, and the ice cream melted into it. He ate every bite. He felt so full he could barely move. A guard near him loosened his belt and laughed. They were all too full. Everyone had eaten too much. It was wonderful. That night, Giovanni could not sleep. His stomach was still full. His mind was fuller. He found a pencil and paper in his barrack. He began to write by the light of a single bulb. He wrote to no one in particular, just wrote to make sense of what he felt. He wrote that he had been told Americans were cruel and weak. Mussolini said they cared only about money and had no honor. Mussolini said they would collapse when facing true warriors. But Giovanni had been a warrior for Italy. He had fought for 2 years. He had nearly starved. He had watched friends die. He had surrendered expecting death or torture. Instead, he found chicken dinners and Thanksgiving feasts. He found guards who showed him family photographs. He found a country so wealthy it could feed its enemies better than Italy fed its soldiers. Giovanni wrote that he finally understood. Power was not about speeches on balconies. It was not about black shirts and raised fists. It was not about conquering other countries while your own people starved. Real power was having so much that you could share it. Real strength was treating enemies like human beings. Real greatness was feeding people instead of lying to them. He wrote that everything he had believed was backwards. Mussolini called America soft, but only strong nations could afford to be kind. Mussolini called America weak, but weak nations do not produce mountains of food. Mussolini called America corrupt, but Giovanni saw more honesty in one Thanksgiving meal than in 10 years of fascist propaganda. He had fought for a lie. He had nearly died for a lie. The truth was served on plates with turkey and gravy. Giovanni folded the paper. He did not know if he would ever mail it. Writing it was enough. Something had broken inside him during that feast. Not his body, but his belief. He could no longer pretend that Mussolini's Italy was glorious. He had seen what actual abundance looked like. He had tasted what a free country could produce. He had experienced dignity, even in captivity. In the morning, Giovanni volunteered for the education classes the camp offered. He wanted to learn English. He wanted to understand how America worked. He wanted to know how a country became this wealthy, this generous, this different from everything he had known. The teacher was a young American soldier who spoke some Italian. He started with simple words. Hello. Thank you. Freedom. Democracy. Giovanni repeated each word carefully. He was learning a new language. He was also learning a new way to see the world. The war ended in May 1945. Giovanni heard the news in the camp library where he now spent his afternoons reading English newspapers. Germany had surrendered. Japan would follow soon. Italy had already switched sides and was broken and poor. The Americans said prisoners could go home. Giovanni felt relief and dread mixing together like oil and water. He wanted to see his family. He feared what he would find. Before leaving, Giovanni packed carefully. His duffel bag held 3 English textbooks the teacher had given him. A small American flag from a guard who said Giovanni had been a good worker. Photographs of the farm family he had helped during his work assignments. The elderly farmer's wife, Mrs. Henderson, had packed him lunches every day for 6 months. She always included an extra sandwich and an apple. She called him son, even though her real son was fighting somewhere in France. When Giovanni said goodbye, she hugged him and cried. She made him promise to write. He promised. The ship back to Italy was crowded with returning prisoners. Everyone was healthier than when they had left. Giovanni weighed 30 pounds more than his capture weight. His clothes fit properly. His teeth had been fixed by a camp dentist. He stood at the rail watching America disappear behind him. Part of him did not want to leave. Part of him felt guilty for that feeling. The ship docked in Naples in July. The city was ruins. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the sky. Rubble filled the streets. Children in rags begged near the port. Old women sold cigarettes one at a time. The smell of sewage and rot hung in the hot air. Giovanni walked down the gangplank into a country he barely recognized. This was victory. This was liberation. It looked like the end of the world. He took a train south toward Calabria. The train was old and slow and stopped frequently because tracks were damaged. Through the window, Giovanni saw destroyed bridges and burned farmhouses. He saw fields full of weeds instead of crops. He saw people walking along roads carrying everything they owned on their backs. Italy had lost the war. Italy had also lost itself. Serra San Bruno looked smaller and sadder than Giovanni remembered. Half the buildings were damaged from bombs. The church had a hole in the roof. Mussolini's portrait was gone from the square, replaced by nothing. Giovanni walked up the familiar road to his family's house. The olive grove looked neglected. Many trees were dead. The house needed paint. Chickens scratched in the bare dirt yard. His mother opened the door. She was tiny now, shrunken inside her black dress. Her hair was completely white. She was 45, but looked 70. She stared at Giovanni for a long moment, then screamed his name and grabbed him. She weighed nothing in his arms, just bones and loose skin. His father appeared, moving slowly, looking ancient. His sister was there too, thin and quiet, her eyes too big for her face. They had survived, barely. That night, his mother cooked what she could, pasta with oil and a few tomatoes, some bread, watered wine. Giovanni ate slowly. The portions were so small. His mother watched him with fierce pride, giving him most of her share. He wanted to cry, but swallowed it down. After dinner, his mother asked the question he had been dreading. Was it terrible? Was the prison terrible? Giovanni set down his cup. He looked at his mother's thin face. He looked at his father's worn hands. He looked at his sister's hungry eyes. He spoke the truth quietly. Mama, I ate better as a prisoner in America than I ever did as a free man under Mussolini. I ate better there than you have eaten in 6 years. I ate chicken and turkey and beef. I drank coffee and Coca-Cola. I had 3 meals every day. I gained weight. They fixed my teeth. They treated me like a human being. His mother's face went through several changes: confusion, disbelief, anger, then something like understanding. She nodded slowly. She had always known Mussolini was a liar. She had just never said it out loud. Now her son was saying it. Her son who had seen the world beyond their village. Her son who had survived. Giovanni stayed in Serra San Bruno. There was nowhere else to go. He helped his father try to revive the olive grove. He fixed the roof on the house. He taught English to children in the village, using his American textbooks. Some neighbors whispered that he had been corrupted by the enemy. Others were simply curious. They asked careful questions about America. Giovanni answered honestly. He did not exaggerate. He did not need to. He kept the American flag folded in a wooden box under his bed. Sometimes he took it out and looked at it. Not because he loved America more than Italy, but because it reminded him of something important. It reminded him that nations were not slogans. They were not speeches or flags or uniforms. They were what they did for people, how they treated the weak, how they shared what they had, whether they fed their children or sent them to die for lies. Years passed. Giovanni married. He had children. He told them about the war, but mostly he told them about the Thanksgiving dinner, about turkey and pie and a chaplain who said everyone deserved dignity. His children did not fully understand. They had grown up in a new Italy, democratic and slowly healing. They had not known Mussolini's lies. They had not tasted the contrast. But Giovanni never forgot. He became a school teacher in the rebuilt village school. On the first day of class each year, he told his students the same thing. I learned more about freedom in captivity than I ever did in service to a tyrant. True strength is not conquering others. It is having enough to share. True power is not cruelty. It is kindness, even toward enemies. The wooden box with the flag stayed under his bed until he was an old man. When his grandchildren asked about it, he unfolded it carefully. He told them it represented something he wished Italy had understood sooner, that how you treat the defeated reveals more about your strength than how you treat the victorious, that a nation's greatness is measured not in battles won, but in meals shared,